Today's video today is Saturday, August 22nd, 2020, and today I'm going to be talking about the Senate races that I believe are money wasters for the GOP. What do I mean by that? Essentially, the GOP is spending millions upon millions, $66 million across these three races alone, in races that they likely are not going to carry. I mean, these are states that are essentially been pushed out of reach. Not to mention there are some other states that they are wasting money in as well. But these are just the biggest races where I'm starting to see a trend in terms of fundraising, because the Democratic Party is likely going to win these races regardless. And while some of these races are competitive on the presidential level, these candidates are in a fight for their lifetime. 2 Republican incumbents, 1 Democrat incumbent in these 3 Senate races. And most of you, if you've watched my channel pretty frequently, you can figure out which states these are straight off the bat. But we need to talk about the impact of this money and why there's so much being spent. And honestly, I pity the GOP in this sense. I mean, I'm starting to see them out fundraise certain candidates that they're underwater by 10, 12% in the polls, and nothing is going to change by, just a couple of dollars being spent. When I say a couple of dollars, I mean a couple of $1 million, because these voters probably aren't going to be swayed by too many ads if your voting record completely doesn't align with the needs of your constituency. But that's besides the point. Let's go ahead and take a look at the regular Senate map. I mean, I'm just going to characterize all of the safe states, not Kansas anymore, and just go ahead and just see where the GOP already starts off. I would say they start off with around 39 safe seats. The rest would be considered to be likely. The Democrats actually have a little bit easier. This is not the same story that was being told just half a year ago. The GOP was at a much better position to retain the Senate. Even if Trump had won the election, the GOP was likely to win. The reason for that? Kansas was not competitive. Montana was not competitive because Steve Bullock was not going to run at that point. South Carolina was not competitive. Georgia was not really competitive. North Carolina was iffy. The Democrats were possibly going to lose in some other states. We'll talk about it once we get there, but it is important to note that the Democratic Party completely rewrote this map, whether that was with the GOP fielding bad candidates or, the Democratic Party considerably out fundraising certain candidates and doing much better in terms of opinion data. It's all beneficial to the Democratic Party, and right now, it looks like they might be the favorites to win back the United States Senate. But let's go ahead and take a look at all of the safe states. So I think I've characterized all of the safe Democratic states at this point. That puts them at 45 Senate seats, which means only 2 Democratic seats at this point are considered competitive, and that is the state of Michigan, and the other state is Alabama. So Alabama looks like it's favorable for the GOP. We're going to characterize, some likely states and then move on to the actual swing states. Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina are all considered to be likely states. I'm actually going to move Texas over into the likely Republican column for this video. Kentucky, I think, should join the fray with being considered a likely state for, for the GOP. And then for the rest of this map, I would say Alaska is the last state I would characterize as likely. The rest I would consider to be swing states, if not Democratic states. But the reason why I'm not doing that yet is because I want to talk about all of these states in particular. So the first state I'd like to talk about in terms of what this video is about is the state of Arizona. Now, why is Arizona out of reach? I mean, Arizona went to Mitt Romney in 2012 by a pretty considerable margin. It went down to a 3.5% margin in 2016, and then 2018 rolls around, and then all of a sudden the House flips in this state. The Senate goes from a Republican hold to a Democratic hold, and now the 2020 Senate race, following John McCain's unfortunate passing, his seat has been vacated. It was replaced by John Kyle. He was the he was the senator who served in now Kyrsten Sinema's seat, I believe, before Jeff Flake, and then he served up until December 31st, 2019. Beginning of the new year, Martha McSally took over. Now, Martha McSally's name might be recognizable because she lost her Senate race back in 2018, despite opinion polling data saying that she would win. And, the thing is, Arizona typically overestimates Republicans. And right now, her Democratic opponent is up 9-10%. The most recent poll that just got released, he's up 19% amongst Arizona voters. And the reason for that, I mean, he's a very likable candidate. From an unbiased point of view, he's the husband of Gabby Giffords. She spoke at the DNC, huge victim of gun violence, very, very big proponent, talking about gun control and everything. His name is going to be, compared to hers and plastered everywhere in Arizona as it is already. I mean, he has a very high approval rating for someone who just recently entered into politics. He's an astronaut. I mean, there's a lot of things about him that could be viewed as admirable. Martha McSally, I understand that she's a veteran, and there's a number of things about her that could be viewed as admirable as well. But you see, she's starting to get desperate. If you saw that little ad that she put out asking people that, if there's a meal that you're fasting, could you donate the cost of that meal? I mean, it just comes to this point where the Republican Party is acknowledging their loss in Arizona, but they're still fighting for it with millions upon millions of dollars. This is the Maine Senate race. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Arizona Senate race, you can see $75 million spent or raised in this race for both candidates. But Martha McSally, $15 million less than Mark Kelley, and those $30 million is a waste. I mean, the GOP is not going to come out on top, even in a best case scenario. I could not find a way to characterize Arizona as a GOP hold. I'm sorry, Martha McSally's just pushed this state so far to the left. I mean, she is the reason why the Democrats won in 2018, and she will be the reason why Democrats win in 2020. There's no excitable candidate on the Senate level for the GOP in Arizona. Mark Kelley is only going to help Joe Biden's numbers here, and Donald Trump is actually losing to Joe Biden in this state. And this state has been drastically moving further and further to the left. And when I say drastically, I mean by 4 or 5% each election, even the 2-year swing between 2016 and 2018. And we're working with the same type of Democratic environment, the Democratic lead that the Democrats had through the 2018 elections in this election, which means that Arizona likely won't show a different result on the House level, the Senate level, and likely on the presidential level as well. In the state of Colorado, this is the next state that I would consider to be a GOP money waster. Now, the reason why I consider that is very similar to the reason of Arizona. Colorado's Senator Cory Gardner is the incumbent. He has actually out-fundraised John Hickenlooper. He also reported a month more of donations, but keeping that in mind, I mean, he should be at least mildly competitive in this race if he's running up the same numbers as his Democratic opponent, but unfortunately for him, he just isn't. He has voted with the Trump agenda over 90% of the time, despite Donald Trump losing this state in 2016. Hillary Clinton carried the state, and based off the FiveThirtyEight expected vote share between Cory Gardner and the Trump agenda, it should be around 45-46%. But it's not. It's at 90%. And Cory Gardner, I mean, he is his approval rating is dwindling in this state. He only won narrowly in a Republican wave year, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen this time around. John Hickenlooper is the former governor, very popular guy, ran for president, has money too. And, Hickenlooper is probably going to come away with this race with a nearly double-digit margin, if not a double-digit margin, which is why I'd consider this race to be a GOP money waster. With $16 million spent here and $30 million spent in Arizona, that's a combined $46 million that could have been spent elsewhere. And I understand they have to spend some money to act like they're going to defend the race, but Arizona's gone, Colorado's gone, and this next state has a Democrat incumbent that the GOP thinks that they can carry. Honestly, it's not going to happen. In the state of Michigan, this is the final state that I would consider to be a GOP money waster. Now, I'm going to keep these 7 swing states up for a reason. We'll talk about them once we get closer. But Michigan, has more money spent here than Colorado, despite, Michigan having a Democrat incumbent in a wave year for the Democrats that likely will end up with Gary Peters on top by 10-12%. Looking at the money spent in this race on the Republican side, $20 million for a failed candidate from 2018. John James could be mildly recognizable as well. He ran against Debbie Stabenow despite her trouncing victory over him. Looking at the margin, it was supposed to be, if this was to match the 2016 election, should have been a close race. John James, honestly, is probably one of the better Republicans they could have put up. But this is a year where Donald Trump is withdrawing ads from Michigan, where Joe Biden is up in Michigan by 8%, where Joe Biden and the Democrats are up 8-9% nationwide, where Gary Peters is leading John James by, sometimes double digits, around 8-9% as well. There's nothing indicating that this race is competitive. And I understand that people expect Michigan to narrow up. And even if it does, Gary Peters likely will get a larger percent of the vote share than Joe Biden in this state. John James can't really run someone who lost 2 years prior. Something would have to drastically change in order for Gary Peters to lose this race. And right now, I'm just seeing these $20 million as money that could have been spent in much better states that just isn't being focused on right now. So these 3 states are the states that I'm referring to as GOP money wasters. But let's talk about Iowa for a moment. The GOP is actually in a very close race in Iowa right now. There's $14 million spent on the GOP side, 11 on the Democratic side, $26 million in total. Looking at the money spent, Joni Ernst is the Republican incumbent. She came in 2014. I mean, she had a pretty good victory back then. But now we're entering into the 2020 race. And she honestly is in a fight for her lifetime. I mean, she is trying to be reelected as a senator from Iowa to her second term, but Teresa Greenfield is sending out numerous ads, and the Democratic Party seems to be realigning with the idea that Iowa is competitive because they're focusing on the House races, so they might just slip in an Iowa Senate ad as well. But, Joni Ernst, she's definitely going to need a lot more money than $14 million, especially with money being wasted in Michigan. $66 million being wasted in these states that I consider to be GOP money wasters. Now, this could very much be proven wrong on Election Day. If somehow John James wins in Michigan or Cory Gardner wins in Colorado or Martha McSally wins in Arizona. But as everything is looking right now, this just seems like an entire waste of money. Kansas as well, not as a waste of money, but a cry for help for the GOP here. I mean, Barbara Bollier is only behind Roger Marshall by 1-2% in opinion polling data. And she has out fundraised him by nearly, 200%. Looking at the money that she has, 300% actually, but looking at the money that she's raised is the largest money raised for any candidate in a Kansas Senate race. That's insane. I mean, $7-8 million in a Senate race in Kansas, in a state that wasn't even remotely competitive 6 months ago, that's insane. And, Roger Marshall, despite him being a good fundraiser on the primary level, has yet to show us that he can raise money on the general election level. Now, it is Kansas. I wouldn't say the GOP needs to be too worried, but the fact that there is money being spent here is important because this isn't like Kentucky. Kentucky's a waste of money for the Democrats. They aren't without that. I mean, $46 million for Amy McGrath, huge waste of money. But for Kansas, the data is showing that Kansas is close. The data is showing that Kentucky is barely close, 9-10%. Kansas is within 1% or 2%. So Kansas is competitive. That's not a waste of money. Kentucky absolutely is. So the Democratic Party isn't without its faults, but the GOP is wasting it on a lot more. In 3 states that are being spread out that very well could have been used in other states. And the final state I want to talk about is the state of Maine. I mean, this is another state that I characterize as swing states. And the reason for that, Susan Collins is probably going to lose this race as it continues. I mean, Sarah Gideon is outperforming Susan Collins in the opinion polling data in terms of fundraising. I honestly don't see a pathway that Susan Collins could out-fundraise her, but that isn't exactly too crucial. She's very well known previously as a bipartisan senator. She used to be very popular, and she sort of is riding that still 2014 vote, 2008 vote that elected her time and time again. And, she's expecting them to carry her through the 2020 election. But unfortunately for her, Sarah Gideon is actually appealing to these Maine voters very well. And I honestly think that the money could be much better spent for the GOP in this state, in Kansas, and Iowa, because these senators and these Republican candidates are in a fight for their lifetime. And the GOP and, donors are wasting money in Arizona, Colorado, and Michigan for candidates that really have less of a chance than the Democrats in those 3 states that I just mentioned. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. Just put it into your browser. It'll give you a little invite. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 Senate election videos or races. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.